Because what happens when we systematically do this, we know what the cost of that is. It's basically the collapse of farms. It's the collapse of industrial agriculture. We talk about this day and age about how we produce more food than the world could possibly eat, and that the problem is food waste. The problem with that argument is it ignores the fact that we're mining soils for today. Hey, welcome back, guys. It's been a long day. I'm not even gonna shave and everything. I'm just gonna put a video out. Went on a bike ride today, pretty long bike ride. Took down some trees at Poppy's place, or a tree, I guess. Quite a lot of work there. This is the third truck full. He actually cut that thing down himself. It was a huge, maybe 60-foot tree. Also went and got 3 loads of wood chips. Gonna expand the gardens around the gazebos. We're gonna put an annual garden in next year, specifically for annuals, instead of sneaking it into my food forest everywhere. I'll probably do that also, to be honest, but I'll definitely have a more organized annual garden next year. So we're going to start that now, because you want to start your gardens a year in advance ideally, so that they can sit and the soil life can build. More importantly though, I had some really good questions, comments from viewers, and we're going to do a little Q&A video today and answer those questions, so stick around. It's about weeds in your garden. Okay, Angela is a longtime watcher of the YouTube channel and always comments on the videos. Very, very appreciated to have people like Angela driving conversation in the comment section below. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I love answering questions about gardening. I love talking shop, you know. So she said that this year, because of watching some of these videos, she's gone to a more wild style gardening and letting some more, weeds exist inside of her gardens. And a lot of people that she knows is telling her to weed more, because the weeds are going to compete with the plants. Okay, so we're underneath my peach tree, and we plant peach pits here to let grow. We have other plants growing here as well, service berries and haskell's and a whole bunch of stuff. We also have lamb's quarters growing here. This is what a lot of people would consider a weed. So what is this lamb's quarters doing? What's its function as a plant, and what are the consequences of us either pulling it or not pulling it? So if you look closely at my peach tree, my baby peach trees, they're going to get some sun shading from the lamb's quarters. They're not going to get 100% sun. So even if this leaf is just behind there, it's shading, a fraction of a percent of the leaf of the peach. So having plants growing in close proximity might increase the total overall photosynthesis of the system. But if I'm only considering and comparing one single plant, then this plant by itself in isolation would do better than if it had any neighbors at all. That's not thinking about what the whole system's doing, that's just thinking about this one plant. The second way that they compete is water. Now, this lamb's quarters arguably going to consume some water. That water is now not available to this peach. Now, I mentioned in my other videos that I don't consider this an issue, because the very existence of the lamb's quarter is going to help shade the soil, and the more soil that you have shaded, the less evaporation you have. So I think having a wall of plants overall actually increases the amount of water available, because you minimize the evaporation. Now, hidden in behind the lamb's quarters, I've got tomatoes. And I have found, this is just anecdotal evidence, but I have found that when I plant stuff densely like this, that I get roughly 90% of the yield of plants that are more on their own. Now at the same time, I find that plants that are on their own need more help, whereas the plants that are planted inside these polycultures and are maybe surrounded by other plants, they don't need as much help. They're much more resilient. So the overall photosynthesis yield of the system is increased. And like I say in many videos, photosynthesis, the most important part of the equation, are those plant root exudates. So the plant takes the photosynthesis energy, takes the carbon out of the air, combines it with water, and pushes sugars down into the soil where the soil life is fed. That soil life now in turn feeds the plants. Okay, so let's talk about the extremes now. Somebody who weeds all the plants and all the competition out away from their gardens, yeah, the individual tomato plant might do a little better this season, but their entire system is getting less photosynthesis energy and their microbiology is going to be depressed compared to somebody who's just simply planting more plants. I don't care what they are. So now we compare that to a crazy, insane polyculture where there's maybe too much stuff. And what you'll see is each individual plant might be operating at 90% capacity, but because we have so many plants growing in such a small area, the overall system is absolutely, without a doubt, zero questions asked, pulling in more energy. Because the question shouldn't be, how do I get the most amount of tomatoes off of one plant for this season? Instead, it should be, how do I get the most amount of food out of my system for the entirety of its existence? So, for example, we have mullein growing right up next to grapes. This mullein is absolutely going to be shading some of the grapes, but it's providing a crop, it's providing tea, it's providing a ton of photosynthesis as well for the soil life. So it's building more soil than would I have if just the grapes existed. Over time, your system's just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger to the point where you can't stop it anymore. Or the complete opposite is what industrial agriculture tends to do, which is destroy and eliminate all possible competition. In this guild here, there's a lot of plants that a lot of people would call weeds. You know, we have Queen Anne's lace there, we've got some goldenrod, we've got mullein, even clover people would call it a weed. We do have ragweed, that I do chop and drop aggressively, but everything else I kind of just let grow. You know, they all have function and use. So this swale is planted out to, you know, a very, very, very dense polyculture. Strawberries, raspberries, I let stuff like lamb's quarters grow, comfrey, well just, I mean, tons and tons of stuff. So what happens when you grow in these dense polycultures is that you get a lot of photosynthesis happening. Now, overall the system is stronger, but if one were to just look at a single plant in this polyculture, it probably would do better if we eliminated all of its competition. Let's look at the extremes of how industrial agriculture does their thing. So industrial agriculture will run a corn monoculture one year, then they'll run a soy monoculture the next year, and then they'll run a fallow year the next year where they just let the whole entire field go to weeds. Now obviously different people do different things, but that's generally considered, you know, the smart, sustainable way to do industrial agriculture. But we should never be modeling our kitchen gardens off industrial agriculture. And I've said that a bunch of times before too. Because how many gardeners do you know would let their garden run fallow for a full year and get nothing out of it? Okay, so let's draw a little black box around your garden or your land, your plot, whatever. We'll look at energy in, energy out, and whatever's left inside that box at the end of the day after the in minus the out is the available energy you have to grow food, life, anything. All life takes and consumes energy to grow. It's just the way that the world works. We only exist because we have a giant burning ball of gas that's constantly putting energy into our little black box of the earth. Like I always say, don't worry about this year's plants, worry about next year's soil. Because what happens when we systematically do this, we know what the cost of that is. It's basically the collapse of farms. It's the collapse of industrial agriculture. We talk about this day and age about how we produce more food than the world could possibly eat. and that the problem is food waste. The problem with that argument is it ignores the fact that we're mining soils for today. We're mining next generation soils in order to produce that abundance. We're not growing sustainably. If we were doing this in a sustainable way, then I would agree. But we're basically selling the kids down the river, selling the grandkids down the river, so that we can produce that abundance today, but we're mining and depleting our soils to do it. So while a garden like mine might be scary to many people, and while they might be right that this year I'll only produce 90% of the yield that they might produce, what I'm not doing is mining my soil. In fact, my soil is actually getting stronger year after year. Instead of following industrial agriculture's method of corn, soy, fallow, or whatever you want to rotate through to basically keep that sustainability thing going on, you're going basically 100% for one year, 100% for the next year, and then 0% for the following year, for an average of 66.6, repeating of course. However, I might be going 90%. So every single year I'm getting 90% of the yield that they're getting, but also my garden is constantly putting energy in a scary looking way back down into the soil. And the plants don't really mind. I say 90%. I haven't watered my tomatoes. I watered them once. I keep saying I haven't watered them. I watered them once, and I'm getting huge tomatoes on them, growing in a carpet of coltsfoot. That alone is enough to tell you, the coltsfoot alone is enough to tell you about the soil quality that I have in my gardens right now, because coltsfoot is a riparian plant that only grows in the most fertile soils down by riverbeds. I am not at a riverbed, and I have this hyper fertility loving plant that is taking over my gardens because my gardens are just that fertile. And I don't amend my soils with compost and stuff constantly, compost manure. All I do is chop and drop the wonderful lamb's quarters that's also a delicious edible. So you use the weeds, you get 90% of the yield, but you grow your soil so that next year your gardens are stronger. Okay, so while they may be right that if you pull those weeds you'll have bigger tomatoes this year, that same person who thinks they know what they're talking about because they've done it that way their whole life because that's how they were taught, that same person comes back to see your garden 5 years down the road and your garden's wild and crazy, but your tomatoes are kicking their butts. They've never seen such healthy plants. They've never seen such lush, vibrant gardens. And it's because your focus is constantly on building soil, not this year's plants, the soil of the future. If you want to maximize your soil, you have to maximize solar panels. It's the only way to do it. It's the only way to maximize the energy going in. And at the end of the day, we obey the laws of thermodynamics in this household. So we have to think about the energy in, energy out equation. And we have to maximize energy in. It's the only way we can do it. Now at the same time today, Corey asked, what do you do about invasive plants? Specifically mentioning a couple weeds, like bindweed and buttercup. So I have a lot of invasive plants here, and I have a strategy that I talk about in many of my videos. Basically I chop them and I drop them and I turn the problem into the solution. Now at the same time, another favorite solution of mine is actually to fight fire with fire. Okay, what you're looking at right now may look like chaos, but this is an area that was once dominated by dog strangling vine. When we bought the property, the lawn was cut roughly to kind of midway in the garden. I actually cut back into this hill in order to reveal some more, area to plant gardens in. However, because the dog strangling vine had established itself so thickly and densely, it just kept popping up. So I found out about permaculture and this chop and drop thing, so I tried to take it to an extreme. what I did was I combined it with another method as well. So I chop and drop the dog strangling vine whenever it comes up, and I can actually see some here. If you look closely, it still wants to pop up every once in a while. This is it here. So I'll cut them ground level and drop them down. You guys have seen me do that enough. I'm not going to show you over and over again. But then what I also did, I don't really get that much here, so sheet mulching helps a little bit, but the thing that really helps is smothering with light. So smothering with shadows, planting something else that you want to grow in that spot. So here's a great example here. This is an area I was doing my compost in before, and this is Amaranth. In the area I was doing my composting in, I would get a lot of dog strangling vine popping up, even after chopping and dropping it constantly. So what I decided to do is sow in a whole bunch of something that I actually want to grow, that is useful to me, that will help outcompete the dog strangling vine. And then chop and drop the dog strangling vine to the amaranth. So amaranth is a great plant. It puts on tons and tons of seeds, and then you can actually use those seeds as almost like a popcorn. Just fry them in a little, they're kind of like quinoa, and they'll kind of pop, and they'll make like a really delicious food on its own, or an additive to salads. So and it spreads like crazy, and it's also great compost. So one way you can fight it is to add and plant something that spreads like wildfire but is useful to you. So thanks for watching. Take everything I said with a grain of salt. Use it where it makes sense for you to use it. Don't use it if it doesn't make sense for you to use it. Just constantly be experimenting, constantly be trying new things, constantly be observing the results of those things, and then adapting and changing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.